Kwasi nito ba? Natasuwi Annawon Weeden, mas masike Wampanoag, no hagani ka mesh takipekwa. Kataputan mo wachi mo nitong kusa ka koma na shabay nishna.
3 years ago, I decided that as part of a novel unit, I really felt it was important for an Indigenous educator to come in and speak about that set of communities and that set of identities. And bringing Annawon in is one of the most impactful things I've done as a teacher, not just in this unit, but in my teaching, because he provides an experience that students digest differently from a normal class. They remember it, they get to ask him questions. It's all the more important that those are the educators, especially from your region, that we're inviting into the classroom so that we can do what we can to stem that erasure and to have the crop of kids who are coming of age now see it as something that isn't right and that they can learn more about, that's not gone, that's very much alive, and that they can care about. And as part of that, we also encountered a recent video that he had been part of, which was all about this teacher in California who had appropriated Indigenous culture, wearing a pseudo-native headdress to prance around the room and chant Sokotoa as some kind of Indigenous chant in a math class.
I'm not doing it for money. I'm not doing it just because somebody invited me to. When you're being asked in any of these situations to do something specifically, for example, the third grades that I'm getting asked to come into, they only want to learn about Miles Standish and his relationship with the colony and the Wampanoags. Like literally we're just a token item added on to local history. And there's no way that that's all I'm going to talk about. I don't want that to be all that people remember about us. I don't want them to just remember the fancy, colorful clothing and the feathers flying and the rhythm of the drum. And those are experiences I do invite the public to appreciate and embrace. However, so much more about our culture. And there's no better learning, I feel, than experience. And those experiences are what brings me into these classrooms. The experience of driving across country to go deal with this issue in California is what literally brought me into this room. But I guess it's also this individual and all that ultimately I had to go through and face to make me make that decision on the whim that I had to make that happen.
He came up to a podium and he spoke his feelings about something that happened in California. Definitely very courageous. Not many people know about their ancestors, and especially me who comes from Hispanic descent. I have very little to know about my ancestors and what my ancestors were doing long before my parents and grandparents were around. So to hear someone who knows a lot about his tribes and a lot about where he came from, and especially the way he articulated himself, it's always a very intelligent man.
It's important because a lot of the Native history has been whitewashed or thrown away or mixed up by non-Native people. A lot of the tribes can't really obtain a lot of their resources due to restrictions, due to laws. Imagine you just can't access free things that coming from the land that you live on and stuff like that, and being told you can't touch any of it. It's kind of heartbreaking.
The age we worked with today, I do not get enough time to work with. They were very, very lucky if they heard anything about my culture, my history, our participation in American history. There's a lot of obstacles I realize I have to face anytime I'm working with youth. If they're not familiar with this, then I have to make sure they get the right impression. So I firmly believe no one can invite me in too young, even just to get kids experiencing our culture and me as an individual. I love to be the first impression. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and I take that very seriously, regardless of what age or background I'm working with or what the reason is. It's just a way of getting people to think about things we're not being told to think about, things that are literally right in front of our eyes that we're being asked to ignore.
Something that stood out to me was definitely King Philip's War. And I feel like when we do talk about history, we only talk about the good parts of U.S. history, but not what history was taken along with it. That made me want to know more about what other parts of history aren't talked about.
I feel like it's extremely important because just so we don't keep continuing to erase history, it's very important to have history there and to know what we've done wrong or what others have done wrong so that we don't make those mistakes again.
I remember in elementary school, pretty much all we were taught about Native Americans were that they lived here, they gave up their lands to colonizers, and that was pretty much it. I had no idea about Native communities in terms of the hierarchy. Hearing that the women, they were highly respected, they were highly regarded, it was very interesting.
I didn't know that back then many of the women were saw as chief, and people had the utmost respect for the queens in the Native culture. The hair and how the braids help with mind, body, and soul, because that's something that my mom also told me about.
I was taught that Columbus was a hero. I was taught that Columbus came on his ships and he founded the US, and I drew in pictures of him. And then when I started to be told that we weren't calling it Columbus Day anymore, we were calling it Indigenous Peoples Day, I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know what an Indigenous person was. He teaches people it needs to be taught through his perspective, not through the history books, because as he said, which really stuck with me, is that history is taught from the victors.
My question is, what are things...
Most of our students are not Native, and so this is learning about a culture that's not their own. And I think a lot of schools have that stated goal of diversity, right, of engaging with other cultures. But I think a lot of schools would benefit from kind of really looking closely at that and taking that next step of, are we engaging with modern Native people who are one of the cultures in America that has been the most erased and the most marginalized? Students don't stick around unless they're interested in something. And we had about 10 students just in a bubble around Annawon, even after class had ended, because they really wanted to learn from him and ask him those questions. His words will be part of a lesson that students themselves will then turn around and run for their peers. I am hoping that what he shared today will reverberate throughout the whole school. And that's really the whole ethos behind his visit is, can he share what he has learned, and then can our students see themselves as people who can amplify those words from another speaker, and can also be change makers themselves and go out and observe things that they don't think are right or things that they think are right, and perpetuate the kind of world that they want to live in. Annawon, who is such a great public speaker, so engaging and really willing to meet students where they are. The students you want to meet where they are the ones who can then go and affect change because they're old enough to do so. And this will be something that the students in my class I know will bring them to life after high school, to college, to their workplaces, and hopefully the rest of their lives.
Literally some of the words that they speak that describe the areas they've lived in their whole life. They go their whole life not knowing what those words are, let alone what they mean and all the messages that are carried in each one. A lot of this was not an option when I was a kid, when my parents were kids, when my grandparents were being forced to stop speaking their language, when my grandparents were being told, cut your hair and literally be ashamed of everything that your culture is here for. I didn't know that my involvement going out to California was going to impact Megan to see the issue and how can she handle it, how can she directly bring this into each and every student that she's brought it to, and without people like her exposing how it can impact them. I was blown away when all the follow-up that I heard about the projects and the paths and pursuits and fights that these kids have taken on. Pretty sure this might still be resonating. There's a lot of people, again, that are being taught this is all normal and it's American society, you're just an American, but there's a lot of diversity out there and things that we need to be exposed to, and I can't thank Megan and any school that helps me to expose whatever I can expose to this generation.
On behalf of Boston Collegiate and all of my students, I want to extend a sincere thank you to Annawon Weeden of the Wampanoag Experience. You were a wonderful speaker and you really did touch a lot of our students' minds, spirits, bodies, and hearts. Thank you so much.